Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are at the start of free agency in the 2041 to 2042 offseason. The good news is for the Pirates, we have freed up some money. The bad news is that we had to move on from several pretty good arbitration and free agent eligible players to do that. But we're standing at the 28th payroll in baseball right now. Our scouting and development budgets are not as high as they were a year ago. Hope is that we'll have some of this $20+ million left over to improve those a little bit before we get to spring training. But we do have some money to spend, which is a good thing because we've got some holes on the team. We have our starting rotation of rookie sensation Luis Longoria, Tony Santana, who we have signed to a long-term contract, Ricky Gotti, who is in the final year of arbitration eligibility and probably will be too expensive for us to keep, and Bobby Gonzalez, who is in the final year of a contract we signed with him near the beginning of this sim. He does have a player option for next year, which I expect him to opt out of. So we've got those kind of four guys back as our key four members of the rotation. Right now, Omar Gaona kind of slots in as the fifth starter, according to our manager. But Heriberto Rosales, who has been our number 5 starter for most of the past 4 seasons that we've been the GM of this club, is also still around. So we're all set with our starting pitching for the upcoming season. You can see we've only got 5 relievers on the team right now, though. So certainly going to be looking for some bullpen help through the free agent market, the trade market, maybe even the Rule 5 draft over the next couple of months. Our lineup situation is kind of funky. We did have an improved performance at the plate last season, which was positive. But we've lost our starting first baseman. We've lost our starting third baseman. We've lost both our starting and backup catchers. And we've lost our starting center fielder from last season with who we have on the roster right now. I feel like with the moves that we made, we're okay in the outfield offensively. Our catchers, which include Venturini, and then back down in AAA, either Sergio Chavis or Ishmael Heel will be up on the roster eventually too, are good defensively, but not that great in terms of hitting. I do feel that with Isaiah Hill, Alex Perkins, Juan Canseco, Alfredo Vasquez, and to a much lesser extent Ignacio Carbajal, we've got pretty good offense in the outfield. Can always use another bat if we can find one. Our infield is the question. I feel that with Victor Serrano at shortstop, Luis Linares back at second base, and the addition of Tony Cota at third base, our infield defense at those 3 key positions is potentially incredible. I just don't have a lot of confidence that any of those 3 players are going to hit all that much. At first base, I think we will get a little more offense with Jose Cuevas, and then potentially bringing up from Indianapolis, Sean Barley. Neither of them is going to be all that great defensively at first, but between the 2 of them, I feel like we've got a decent bat at first. So heading into the offseason, if we can find another bat for the outfield, particularly if it's a center fielder, because right now Ignacio Carbajal is slotted in as our center fielder after losing the job last year. Love his glove, but he's not much of a hitter historically. If we can bring on a bat, particularly one that can play center field, that could work. And then obviously if there is a big-time corner infield bat that's potentially out there, that would be another direction for us to go. Looking at the top of the charts as far as the free agents who are available, our old buddy Alex Vasquez from Kansas City is finally a free agent on his way to a Hall of Fame career. Another future likely Hall of Famer, O'Neill Cruz, is a first baseman, but at 43 years old, looking for $20 million. Probably not going to work for these Pirates. Interesting, though, that Ramon Herrera, who was our center fielder last year and we had to move on from, we traded him to the Red Sox, and we got back a decent reliever in return because his arbitration number was expected to be around $7 million, and we just couldn't afford it. But it looks like the Red Sox let him go. That's we traded him and minor league pitcher Willie Brown for Tony Jones and some cash. But they didn't end up offering him arbitration like 3 weeks later, which was kind of dumb. I guess that's one of the flaws in the game. I certainly didn't feel like we had taken advantage of the Red Sox in the trade, but and we're on a tough trade level, as we've talked about in the past. But if they weren't going to keep him, it didn't make sense for them to ship a player and some money to us. But he apparently is only looking for $1.7 million. He's not as good defensively as Carbajal, but he had a big-time offensive year for us last year. Hit .269, 23 homers, 37 doubles, and certainly profiles as having a much better bat than Carbajal. If we can bring him back for $1.7 million, even though it's a bigger need for us to potentially get a corner infielder, I think we certainly need to do that, given that I do have a bit of a fear that we're not going to have enough bats on this team. And he's looking for just a one-year deal at $1.7 million. Obviously, I'd love to sign him for a little bit longer and give ourselves a little optionality with him. We do have some big outfielders coming up through the farm system. But given the fact that he can play a competent defensive center field and hit a little bit, if we can kind of get him signed for something in the neighborhood of what he's looking for a couple years, maybe have an option year in there, it would be a nice contract for these Pirates to sign. I can't imagine he's going to go for this. He's looking for 1 year at $1.7 million. We're offering him 3 years at an average of $1.7 million, but a team option for the last season. So a very palatable contract for this Pirates team for a guy who's a above average hitter and I guess probably slightly above average, all said and done in terms of his defensive skill in center field. Could also play left or right, left-handed bat. At that kind of money, if we had him as a fourth or fifth outfielder a couple seasons down the line, I think it would certainly be a good contract. Let's see what he thinks. Yeah, he doesn't want to be tied up long-term, which doesn't shock me. Hey, we gave it a shot. If we can still get him signed, we could always talk extension during the season, but as I said, his arbitration number was $7 million, and I think he's certainly more than a $1.7 million a year kind of player. So I don't really understand the dynamic where he thinks he needs to prove himself for a season to get a big contract coming off of the year he just had. And it may be a situation where he starts negotiating with us low, gets in a bidding war, and ends up getting $5 or $6 million when all is said and done. But we'll offer him 1.6 for 1 year now. He's willing to think about it. Again, not our biggest need, but this was a guy that it was hard to move on from. It was one of those difficult decisions we had to make to free up some free agency money. If we're able to get him back for about $5.5 million less than we thought we were going to have to pay him, would be a huge win for us. Speaking of huge wins, Adrian Oliva, who was our first baseman last year, is also out there. Hit .311 for us, but looking for $13 million. Even with the money that we do have to spend, I feel like the potential first baseman that we do have with Cuevas and Barley probably not going to hit .313 for us, but are potentially solid major league hitters. If there was a third baseman out there with a big bat who has a decent glove, would love to bring him on board. Avery Lazenby, doesn't have a huge glove, but does have a decent bat, but he's looking for over $20 million a year, so that's not really practical for us. Our old buddy Tony Fonseca, who had played shortstop for us until about a year and a half ago, is out there. He would be another dynamic defender for our infield, but quite honestly, I feel like Fonseca, obviously, with that 80 error, 80 arm, and 80 turn double play, is obviously an exceptional infielder. But his bat is certainly below average. And I feel right now, when you think about our team and the infield that we're trying to improve, we've got Victor Serrano at second base, who's pretty excellent defensively, has some speed, not much of a bat. We've got Luis Linares back at short, very good defensively, has the best bat of the crew. You know, if we can get another 291 season with 50 doubles and a 100 plus OPS plus and WRC plus out of him, I'd view that as a big win. He's probably going to regress somewhat. And then Tony Cota at third base is a brilliant glove, but again, just not much of a bat. I'm willing to go into the season with those three at second, third, and short, even though the offense I don't think is going to be exceptional, simply because they are potentially an exceptional defensive infield. But I do worry a little bit that we're going to be lacking on the offensive side in terms of the production of those three players. But I don't think there's an obvious answer out here that fixes that for us. Avery Lazenby or Gerald Nin are the best bats out there that can play third, but they're also going to be looking to make 20 to 25 million. So I don't think there's an obvious solution on the free agent market for us right now. As I said, I'm willing to go into the season with those three excellent defensive infielders if that's the way things shake out. Obviously, there's lots of time for the contract demands of some of these players to come down significantly, and there's always potential that some random free agent will just pop up somewhere. Can always look at the trade market. The trade block right now is pretty thin at the early stages of the off season here, unfortunately, and particularly you can see at third base, doesn't really look like there's going to be anyone who's going to be all that exciting or much of an upgrade to what we already have. But we're not going to rush at anything right now. But definitely interested in seeing what happens with the offer that we made to Herrera, and then also going to take a look at the pitchers that are available, because as I mentioned, we do kind of need to add probably 2 arms for the bullpen at the very least. And there's a lot of good arms out here, but paying $40 million to bring back Tony Machuca as a starter, we picked him up for the stretch run last year, or $15 million for a potential reliever in his 30s, just doesn't strike us as something that we can do with this team. If any of these top flight kind of players come down in their demands and are lingering out on the free agent list, could certainly look to go after one of them. I am a little intrigued by Aaron Kay, 26-year-old free agent. He's a player that, familiar theme here for those of you who have been watching, that I believe we drafted in the Royals back when we were drafted with the Royals back in the day when we were part of that team's franchise. We took him in the 9th round back in 2033. 26 years old now, really good fastball plus slider, so he's got excellent stuff, average movement and control. He's 26 years old, but he's only been up for 25 total days and only pitched in 4 games, and he's been pretty brutal in those 4 games with an 8.31 ERA. I think that's certainly a question of a small sample size. OSA has him rated even better than our scout does, so I do have some confidence that those ratings are what they are. I think he's a better pitcher than the sample size has indicated. A ground ball pitcher who throws in the high 90s with the infield defense that we're going to have in Pittsburgh, I think is a potential asset. For what it's worth, he's also very popular nationally, and the Pennsylvania native is extremely popular locally for the Pirates, so that doesn't hurt either. $5 million a year is a lot for a player who is this unproven. I'm definitely relying more on the ratings and the fact that if his slider continues to improve, his stuff may improve a little bit, and he'll be even better than we think he is. But I just don't know who else to add. There's no one that jumps off the page for us. I could wait a little bit, but given that we need 2 pitchers, I kind of want to get at least one of them signed now, and then that gives us potential to maybe look for the Rule 5 draft for a guy at the real back end of the bullpen, and or waiting for one of these higher priced players to come down in price as he lingers in free agency, and then also potentially set something in a trade. But I'd like to try to do something now with K, maybe an overreach. He's actually, although the average he's looking for is $5 million, the real big number is the 3rd year of the contract. If we're able to sign him for a little less than this and maybe make it a team option in that 3rd year, maybe we can get something done. Also don't know that I want to guarantee a guy who's pitched 4 major league games with an 8.31 ERA the role as our closer either, so that may become a sticking point in the negotiations as well. I don't know that he's going to go for this contract, but I also don't know that it's a total insult for someone who's as unproven as him. He's looking for an average of $5 million a year over 3 years. We're offering him an average of $4.33 million over the same 3 years, but a team option in the final year when the contract is higher. We're also not guaranteeing him the role of a closer. Says we're close on the money, which isn't bad. He really wants that guarantee of the closer role. I'll offer him a little more money. I don't think I can guarantee this guy the closer role, though. All right, I'm almost meeting him on the money. He was coming in wanting 4.58. We're at 4.53. Do have a back-weighted team option, and I'm still not guaranteeing him the closer role. We'll see what he thinks. He really wants that closer role, and he really wants more money. I don't think this is a guy that I'm going to chase right now. I do like him. I just don't know how much demand there's going to be for him. We'll let things simmer for a while with Mr. K. And we're still a couple weeks away from the Rule 5 draft, but obviously looking at the players we could lose, and we're going to have to add some people onto the roster. 2 of the top prospects in baseball, Henry Gonzalez and Angel Aguilar, are eligible to be picked up from us. Gonzalez split last year between AA and AAA, is pretty much ready for the major leagues, given that we're pretty solid in the outfield. I'm going to try to keep him down as long as possible. Have thought about whether I could move him to first base. Given that he's 6'3", and his infield ratings are not horrible. They're borderline horrible, but at least the range is a 45. The error rating of 35 bothers me a bit, but it might not hurt to have him available to play first base, just because with the bats that we already have in our outfield, clearly he's going to be playing. If he's up in the majors, he's the number 12 prospect in baseball. We picked him number 1 overall right when we were starting this playthrough in 2038, and he's a more than competent corner outfielder. But can't hurt to have that versatility to potentially play first, but obviously need to put him onto the 40-man roster so we don't lose him. Similarly, Angel Aguilar, number 6 prospect in baseball. I honestly don't love him as much as Gonzalez. Maybe it's just the bias of the fact that Aguilar was a top pick the year before we took this team over, so I don't have as much emotionally invested in him as I do in Gonzalez. But he's not as good defensively as Gonzalez. His contact is potentially going to be off the charts, as you can see. He did struggle hitting .236 in AAA last year, so I think he's a little bit further away. But clearly, going to add him to the 40-man, not a player that we can afford to lose. And you can see there's still, other veteran players. But then when we look at potential, fake Medeiros, closer who hasn't been above A-ball, profiles as someone who could be a major league reliever. We'll have to figure out whether we want to add him or not. He was a 3rd-round pick the year before we took the Pirates over. Not the best personality, and I think with that lack of control, it's going to be someone who it's a real struggle to have him on a major league team next year. So I guess I'd prefer not to get the clock ticking on him having a major league salary, even though obviously we're not paying that full amount when he's in the minors. But got some decisions to make with some of these players, but the 2 obvious players that we don't want to lose in the Rule 5 draft are now on the 40-man roster. So don't have to worry about making a stupid mistake and losing a Henry Gonzalez or an Angel Aguilar. And you can see with Aguilar, Gonzalez, and then obviously what we have already with Isaiah Hill, what we have with the reigning Rookie of the Year, Alex Perkins, Alfredo Velasquez, Juan Canseco. Don't forget about Andres Mendez. We've got some lumber in the outfield, that's for sure. And it looks like Tony Machuca, the prize of the offseason, the fans aren't happy that we lost the guy that was with us for 2 months, signed with the Cardinals, $31 million a year for the next 6 years. So a big contract for Machuca. Certainly not the $40 million a year he was supposedly asking for, but did take a big bump in fan interest. That's what stinks about, some of these players who are on the team for a couple of months. Probably one of the number 1 things I would put on my list of things to refine for OOTP 24 next year would be a little more nuance in the fan interest, because it is so critical in terms of building a franchise. We never intended to make a long-term offer to Machuca when we signed him. I don't think that any fans would have ever expected a team like the Pirates to be able to afford him after we made that. We didn't sign him. We traded for him before the trade deadline, and we had to have his old team keep a big chunk of his contract. So the fact that we clearly don't have the budget to sign him, but we still take a big hit is a little annoying. But as I often say, it is what it is. And we did miss out on Aaron Kay, unfortunately. He signed with the Dodgers. Kind of the numbers he was willing to talk to us about, but they promised him that closer role. I just don't like the tension that can happen in the clubhouse when you promise a role to someone that you're not going to give to them. Maybe I was too conservative, but there's plenty of other fish in the sea as far as relief pitchers, as far as I'm concerned. Herrera, as we start the winter meetings, finally has gotten back to us, and he's willing to think about our contract. Would be nice to get him on board. And we weren't part of the draft lottery, so doesn't impact us, but it looks like the Twins, unfortunately, dropped for them from the number 1 pick in the draft all the way to number 5. And the Dodgers should be just embarrassed that they went 57 and 105 last year with a payroll of 178 million right now, a budget of 372 million, and they went 57 and 105. For shame. For shame, Dodgers. Getting outplayed by our little Pittsburgh Pirates team. You should be embarrassed. Your performance is pathetic. Our fan loyalty isn't pathetic, Los Angeles. Your performance on the field is. And we've lost another pitcher, at least in the case of Macias. He was actually on our team for the full season last year, but a 36-year-old reliever making $6 million, and fan interest really has crashed. A 6-point hit, and now we're back down in the 40s. And that does have me worried that our ticket prices might be too high. The fan interest dynamic is definitely busted in the game with the fact that a Pittsburgh team that had been in the gutter, literally, and we've had 2 playoff appearances in the past 3 years, 94 win season and 93 win season. And when a trade deadline acquisition and a middle reliever lead our team, the fan interest drops by almost 20%. Doesn't make the most sense, and it definitely breaks immersion in the game for me. We're going to have to find some popular players and try to sign them, even if they're not the right fit when we are looking to improve our bullpen. And finally, a good piece of news here about a month into free agency. Ramon Herrera did sign the 1-year deal with us. So that'll give our offense a boost. Not going to be quite as good defensively with him in the lineup instead of Carvajal in center field. But he's such a much better bat than Carvajal that I think that's fine. You can see right now Carvajal is batting 9th and playing center field. Just make that one change, and we've got Herrera batting 5th and playing center field now. So that's a big bat for us to add. I don't think he's going to be as productive as he was last year, but I think his bat is going to be more productive than Carvajal's by a material amount. So given that I am still a little worried about our offense with the big focus on defense that we've taken in our infield thus far, I think the addition of Herrera, even if it's just a 1-year deal, is a good move for us. Wonder if we talk extension now, what he's thinking. And now he's interested in like that same kind of amount. If we can get a player option in there, and I'm always going to try to get it for less, especially playing with the Pirates. But if we can get him locked up for another 3 years on top of this at $1.5 million a year, again, I think that he potentially becomes a 4th or 5th outfielder for us down the line when the young guys start coming up. But with the fielder that he is and the bat that he has at that kind of money, that's a good contract for the Pirates. Why are we above budget all of a sudden? Money for extensions is down. Oh, geez. Did someone... I mean, Linares' number is big, but we knew that. Our salary next year is less than this year with the players that are coming off. And we've allegedly got $18 million to spend right now. Oh, I see what happened. by keeping the ticket prices at 16, our fan interest is down so much that we're expecting our revenue to plunge next year. So I do need to sign some players to bump up the fan interest, but I can still, I'll need to, I know I was talking just briefly about, not that long ago, about possibly lowering the ticket prices, and my gut was kind of to do it, but I know that a bunch of you are going to yell at me if I make my ticket prices any lower, so I didn't do it. I wasn't going to go that low, and obviously the reason that, we're going to be potentially selling 4,500 fewer season tickets than we did a year ago is because the fan interest has just taken such a silly hit so far. So hopefully if we add a couple popular players, that'll give us the little bump, but it just kind of stinks that at this point in the playthrough, 4 years into it, because we're dealing with the Pirates and a small market with pathetic fan loyalty, that we're still going to have to make free agent decisions as much based on who happens to be noted as extremely popular as the player's actual quality. But it is what it is. That's the financial model in the game, so we're going to do the best we can do in it. But we'll cut scouting and development budget temporarily, see if that allows us to hopefully get Herrera signed to that extension that we were talking about with him. And then we're kind of at the point where we're going to have to start trying to sign some popular free agents. It is what it is, but got to play the game. But we'll see if we can get Herrera locked up. A couple other players we might want to lock up too on our pitching staff now that we've opened up a little bit of capacity potentially. Heriberto Rosales, $2.2 million a year. If we can get him for a little less than that, he's a respectable fifth starter. Also a guy who's going to be potentially in our bullpen. I can get these guys who are useful major leaguers signed to deals that we could get out of pretty easily without having to include a ton of big time prospects. I think we should try to do it. Rosales willing to think about it. The other guy that I'm thinking about is the guy who potentially has taken his role in the back end of the rotation, our good buddy Omar Gaona. He's making $2.1 million this year. He is a fan favorite, so if we signed him to an extension, maybe we get a little bit of that popularity back that we've lost. But he's also not looking for an incredible amount, less than he's making this year, actually. If we can get him signed to kind of a similar-ish contract, or in this case, it's looking like an identical contract to what we offered to Rosales, we'll definitely lock him up. In the case of Gaona, maybe that gives us a little bump to fan interest, so we can sell a few more season tickets also. He's willing to think about it. So we'll see if we can get those guys signed, and then we've also got to obviously start looking at free agent pitchers who are popular, and if they actually happen to be able to throw the ball over the plate at more than 60 miles an hour, that would be nice too. And there's some decent pitchers out there, but looking at extremely popular players, I would love to bring on Mario Bustamante, but he's looking for $16 million a year. He's not worth that. Gabe Pryor is a guy we know from our Kansas City days. Excellent reliever. Not going to pay $16 million for a wrecked 35-year-old. Alfredo de la Rosa is more reasonable. He's extremely popular, but he is a borderline major league arm who's 34 years old, who spent 36 days in the majors and is looking for $4.6 million. I mean, I almost feel like I have to make an offer to one of those guys, but it's not the right thing to do for the field, and ultimately how we do on the field is going to determine how successful this playthrough is. Just going to wait, take a deep breath. We'll see what happens with those offers we made to the guys on our team. Gaona, Rosales, Herrera. I don't think Herrera's all that popular. He's well known, so we didn't get a boost when we signed him. Heriberto, he's not popular, so really the only potential boost we're going to get is from our old buddy Omar Gaona. And we've made it to the Rule 5 draft. Maybe we can find some talent to help us here. We're going to be picking 23rd. Who knows what's going to be available by the time we get to our pick. Looking at the pitchers who are available in terms of their overall ratings. No one jumps off the page. Looking at the potential. Few younger guys, including our guy, Fike Medeiros, who we ended up not protecting, obviously. Sergio Robinson. Nice personality. I mean, he's a borderline major leaguer. Never pitched above A ball. He's been pretty effective in A ball, but that's still a big jump. Looking at the batters who are available. Oscar Mendoza is probably a decent prospect, but he's so far away. He's fragile, 22 years old. Looks like he could be a decent bat in the outfield, but with the outfield bats that we have, not the type of player that we'd be willing to keep on the roster all season. What does the scouting director think we should do? He doesn't think we should do anything. I'm going to spend a little time kind of digging through the players, but maybe we don't end up doing anything in the Rule 5 this year. We're actually going to pick at least one pitcher. We're going to go and take Nick Jarman. He's out with a torn flexor tendon in his elbow for another 2 months. So who knows what he's actually going to look like in spring training when he comes back. He's a 25-year-old who has been a disaster at the major league level with a 6.70 ERA over 43 innings pitched, more walks than strikeouts. He doesn't have incredible stuff, but he does still have a 4-pitch arsenal. Good movement on his pitches. He's a ground ball pitcher, potentially has plus control. I have a feeling we'll be cutting him at the end of spring training, and who knows if, his ratings are totally down the tubes after he recovers from that torn flexor tendon, but we'll take a free shot on at least getting a look at him in spring training. So we'll go ahead and draft him. Move on to the next round. Scouting director still recommends we do nothing. I'll let you know whether I agree with him or not shortly. And as we talked about, we don't need an outfielder at all at this point after bringing back Herrera. But I'm going to bring Luis Flores to camp just for the heck of it. He's a 22-year-old, hasn't played above Double-A. Fantastic personality, great bunter, good speed, and certainly profiles as someone with those contact and gap power ratings, as someone who could be knocking a lot of doubles and triples. Not great home run power, but he's going to walk, not strike out a horrible amount. I find it incredibly hard to believe that he's going to make our 26-man roster, but we'll bring him into camp and see what he looks like. So not too much happened in the Rule 5 draft this year. We and the Twins, who were the worst team in baseball, were the only two teams to pick two people. I don't have a ton of confidence that either of them is going to make our roster, but you'll never know if you don't try. And we have gotten all those extensions signed. The fans are happy with Gaona signing. Also got Rosales and Herrera signed to those pretty low contracts. 1 point bump in fan interest. Ooh, we're going to sell a couple hundred more, like 100 more season tickets. We got to sign some popular players. That's all there is to it. Don't really like any of these popular players out there. I guess let's look at for maybe if there's some relievers that we can trade for who are popular. That may be the angle for us to approach right now. And in the other interesting news, it's December 24th. So in addition to being Christmas Eve, we're also only about a week away from January 1st, which in addition to being New Year's Day, is also the day when we'll find out whether Bobby Witt Jr., who was the cornerstone of our 5 championship teams when we were general manager of the Kansas City Royals, whether he will join the legends of the game as a first ballot Hall of Famer. So we're going to pursue perhaps a trade in the near term, and we'll be finding out about Mr. Witt Jr.'s Hall of Fame candidacy very soon. We have a trade. You can probably tell how excited I am about it by the tone of my voice. We're giving away some garbage. Starting pitcher Jean Porras, not much of a prospect. Starting pitcher Freddie Antonio, a little bit more of a prospect, but not really one. And then second baseman Lee Dixon, who's a veteran, decent personality to have in the clubhouse, just minor league depth. So we're not giving up anything of note. But we're trading for Edwin Campos, who is a wrecked 34-year-old making $22.2 million a year, who is a, by definition, average-ish pitcher over the course of his major league career, coming off of a 7.83 ERA in his most recent season with the Cubs. But he's extremely popular, so we'll sell a few extra seats if we bring him onto our team. The Cubs are willing to retain the vast majority of his contract, which helps us. And we're still going to be spending over $2 million on this mediocre pitcher, but we've got to do something to put some more fans in the seats. So hopefully signing this physically enfeebled, washed up, mediocre relief pitcher. I mean, I guess he's been a starter most of his career, but he's going to be in the bullpen for us. He's got 2 career saves. I mean, I guess he is a guy who won 10 games or more 7 years in a row as a starter with the Cubs. And he was actually pretty decent in some of those years, but he's had some pretty miserable years as a major leaguer also. We're going to trade for this guy who's going to be angry because he's been promised by his previous team that he's going to be a starting pitcher, and we're going to try to use him as little as possible. But he's popular. Welcome to Pittsburgh, Edwin. Hopefully you give us a nice popularity bump this year, because when you leave us as a free agent less than a year from now, I know we're going to take a popularity hit. So hopefully we at least get the benefit of having you on our roster as our 11th or 12th pitcher for a little bit. Complete the trade. Oh, the fans are happy. We brought this washed up pitcher onto our team. Only a 2-point bump, but That helps us sell another 100 season tickets at $16. So I'm losing my zest for this playthrough through the frustration of the fan interest system. All right, I think we've got another trade together for a guy who wasn't on the trade block, but who's actually a much better pitcher. Manny Collazo, who is a 24-year-old. He's been closer for the Orioles for parts of the last couple seasons. Good personality, fan favorite. The most important thing, he's extremely popular. Durable, 2 good pitches, plus stuff, movement, and control. Over the course of his major league career, he has been a above average major league pitcher. His Sierra of 4.25 scares me a little bit, but he's also only 24 years old, and he still can get better. He's going to start making real money for a reliever next year. His arbitration estimate is $4.6 million, or I guess this season after next. So that's not optimal, but I think we will get another bump in fan interest if we bring him on board. And they're also going to send us back a decent amount of cash, which always helps with a team like ours. We have to give up an interesting prospect to bring him on board. Robbie Luces, who was a scouting discovery of ours towards the end of our first season, a legitimate scouting discovery, a guy who still looks like he's got 3-star potential. But as I think about him, best case scenario, I kind of view him as a replacement-ish level third baseman. And given that we need to win now, I'm willing to give up a guy who, I guess maybe best case scenario is he's a little above average as a third baseman, but probably base case is he's a slightly above replacement level third baseman. Just not that exciting. And it gives us an arm to hopefully help us win this coming year. Someone who will probably have some value if we do have to trade him over the next few years as his arbitration number gets higher. And most importantly, he's popular with the cool kids. So we are going to make the trade for the youngster Manny Collazo and hope we get like a big bump in fan interest from bringing him on board. Ooh, the reaction is amazing. The fan interest increases significantly. We did get a nice bump, and you can see that puts us in line to sell, about 500 more season tickets. So at least we're kind of bounced back now from that level at 49 fan interest that we had dropped to. Now we still probably have some more free agents that we're going to lose in the coming weeks that'll push us back. But at least I feel like we've recovered some of the pain. In retrospect, I still wish I had dropped the ticket prices a little bit. I always like to sell as many season tickets as possible. Now, if we go out and we win 90 games again with a $16 ticket price, we're going to be close to selling out most games, and our revenue per game is not going to take the predicted 21% hit that we have right now. But clearly, we've got to put a team on the field that is going to actually go out and win 90 games again, which is certainly not a guarantee. And it does look like, looking at our roster, that Manny Collazo is going to slot right in as our closer, which Greg Gaylord and Elijah Helton probably aren't happy about. But, and I mean, for long term for us, it probably just means that his arbitration number, if he goes out and saves 40 or 50 games for us this year, is going to be even higher than we already think it is. But in contrast to Mr. Campos, I think Collazo can actually be a pretty significant contributor to our team next year. So happy to have him on board. and we're getting close. We're only days away from finding out. Is Bobby Witt Jr. a first ballot Hall of Famer? And we've made it to January 1st and the Hall of Fame voting results. Talked about this a lot during our Kansas City Royals playthrough. I think looking at the statistics and looking at some of the other players who have made the Hall in this sim, that Bobby Witt Jr. will definitely make it to the Hall of Fame eventually. I think he probably gets in on the first ballot, but let's find out. He did not make it his first year. He was the top vote getter with 63.7%. You can see his former teammate Salvador Perez, Alex Bregman, Ronald Acuna Jr., Will Smith, Matt Olson, Lucas Giolito, Adley Rutschman, Adalberto Mondesi, another former teammate, and Nick Mikolajek, who we had a big effort to try to sign many years ago when we were playing with the Kansas City Royals. Were the top vote getters this year, but MJ Melendez, his former catcher on his teams, also got some votes this year. But Witt Jr. is not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but at 63.7% and the leading vote getter out there. I would think that eventually he will get into the Hall of Fame. Just reviewing his stats for those of you who haven't watched before or didn't watch our Kansas City playthrough. Perennial Gold Glove winner, perennial All-Star, Rookie of the Year, a couple of Silver Slugger awards, although one of them's hidden there behind his shoulder that you can't see. 5 World Series championships, and was the most valuable player in 4 different playoff series. Ended up having his career cut short by injuries and just kind of really going downhill quickly. Still led the league in stolen bases 3 times, hits once, runs once, and with the all of those Gold Gloves and all of those All-Star awards, I think he will eventually get in, even though his counting statistics are not quite as high as they would have been if he had played a few more seasons. I think one of the key things why he'll ultimately get in is that 80.6 WAR for his career, and that 7 WAR average over 162 games are both pretty impressive numbers. You can see from some of the Hall of Fame metrics that are focused on counting statistics and those kind of things that he's a little below average in most of them, and well below average in black ink. Above average for Hall of Fame third baseman in terms of JAWS. But given that he was the number 1 vote getter this past season, I think that Bobby Witt Jr. will eventually get in, but we do need to wait for another season. And we've definitely still got some work to do this offseason. We've got 2 relievers, plus an arm that we picked up in the Rule 5 draft, who maybe will bounce back from injury. So we've done a little bit with the pitching staff. We've added an outfielder, which wasn't a top need for us, but does give us a little flexibility, particularly with the fact that we've got Herrera signed for several additional years now. And we've still got probably about $8 million to spend. I'd like to put another $30 million back into these scouting and development budgets to get us right back where we were a year ago. But we've still got some money to spend to take on some contracts, hopefully of popular players, and sell a few more season tickets, get the fans a little more excited, and most importantly, actually hopefully put together a team that can compete for a playoff spot and hopefully get back into the playoffs again next year. So we'll focus on our final moves in free agency, perhaps trades in our next episode, and also go through spring training and get these Pirates ready for the 2042 regular season. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.